So welcome to Critical Connections, and I'm happy that we have Clare Twomey here from England. And the Critical Connections mission is to encourage and enhance critical writing in ceramics. So I sent out her website, so I hope that you all have had a chance to look at that if you weren't familiar with her work. But otherwise, Clare, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks very much, Elaine, and everyone for joining. I'm very, very interested in the topic you're discussing because I think it's central to the artist's role. And I say that because I'm passionately lead through practice. And I've made it my business that if I write as an artist. I don't try to write necessarily as an academic or as a critic. And so other people's words have been very important to my practice because I'm solely focused on practice. And I use words, and the proposals I put together are really finely crafted. So it's not to say that I can't write, but I write through an artist's poetic practice of writing. So I really appreciate critical discourse as well as an articulation of practice, which I find difficult to do for myself. And I'll explain as I go through. I've kind of woven the work that I'm going to show you in the next half hour, really around the idea of my work, but other people's words. So I'm going to read you a couple of extracts as we go through that no doubt we can come back to. And the slide that you're seeing here is of my most recent work, which is the terracotta slithers at the bottom, kind of worshipping this huge kiln in Germany, where my large public artwork was made, and it's just been installed in Bond Street in central London. A huge honor to make this work. But what I want to read you to begin with is the artist statement written by Alan Graves for his British ceramics book published by the V&A just last year. And I'd like to read you this because it's somebody else's view on what I've been doing for the last 20, 25 years. And it's really helpful to have somebody who I respect, somebody who's also dedicated their life to clay and the curation of clay, and very much to artists. So I'm going to read you this, which I could not have written myself. Clare Twomey is a British artist, researcher, and curator. Twomey is among the most groundbreaking and influential ceramic artists of her generation. Clare Twomey is a defining figure of the expanded field of ceramics. Her practice encompasses site-specific installation and performance. She frequently collaborates with institutes and embraces audience participation and temporality. Oh, I wish I said that better. Twomey uses these strategies to explore themes of social responsibility, often creating scenarios in which her audience are encouraged to make conscious decisions that determine their engagement with the work. Twomey's installations explore aspects of craft, skill, values in making, choreographing, processes, performance. Her work is invariably concerned with serial production, enacted in her studio, in the public realm, or for conceptual reasons, outsourced from industrial manufacturers. And I think that's a really interesting text because Alan has placed my work within a genre of work and also within a timeline that I would find very, very difficult to do for myself. My artist statement had some of those elements, but wasn't as pinpointing and probably didn't have that overview, because inside that statement, he's not only talking about my work, he's talking about movements such as the expanded field. And when I started making work, only Rosalind Krauss had applied that to the world of sculpture in terms of clay practices. We didn't have these words or these languages. So it sets amongst time the work that I've been undertaking. And so I'm going to take you back here to 1997. This is the first work that I made coming out of the Royal College, and absolutely nothing was written about this work. I have no words of others that delve into this work. It's probably part of some book that will come out in, I don't know, I have to wait till I'm about 80 to get a book, don't I? So it'll probably be somewhere around that time that this work will be written about. But Shoal was a piece of work that won the only prize I've received, actually. It was for works of graduates coming out of art schools, and this work won the prize, yet some of the venues didn't even take it out of the box, because the idea of installing 100 objects, these are just hung. I mean, I don't think it was the politics that kept it in the box, 100 French nuclear submarines. It was the complicated nature of what it might mean to hang something. And so it was only later I found out that a couple of the venues, when it toured around the UK, didn't take the prize-winning piece out of the box as an exhibition. So certainly nobody wrote about it at the time, because it was asking new questions of the field. It was asking new things of museums, which has been a great part of the work that I've undertaken for a very long time, to challenge institutions in the way that we view clay, or the way that clay performs. Does it only perform historically, or can it perform in a contemporary, or even looking beyond the contemporary manner in a kind of freeform? I suppose that's what Alan Graves would call the expanded field. This work here, Consciousness Conscience, was made originally in 1999, and Tanya Harrod wrote about it sometime later as an overview of a text. So I'll read a couple of her words here. And again, this is another kind of aerial view of an artist, which is incredibly helpful when you're in your studio and you're wrapped inside the projects that you're undertaking. It's very difficult to have an aerial view, or to even have the idea that an aerial view one day may appear. But Tanya Harrod, who is our great critical writer, I'm sure you're all familiar with her work, she writes, Clare Twomey, on the other hand, creates installations that are performative and short-lived. Her installation, Consciousness Conscience, first shown at the Korean Biennial, played with ideas of value. The visitor faced a dilemma. In order to get to some images pinned to a distant wall, she had to cross the room. In the process of walking on and destroying the floor of low-fired bone china box tiles. Twomey's most striking project, and she goes on to talk about Trophy, which I will come to in a few minutes within the major works that have been written about. But Consciousness Conscience in 1999, again, because it wasn't shown in the UK until the Tate chose to show it when was it? Some 8 years later, or maybe it was earlier than that. But originally it was made for Korea, and there wasn't a lot of critical writing around that. The next work, which starts a relationship with actually, I'll take you back. Well, from Consciousness Conscience, when it was shown at the Tate, I met curator Amy Dixon, and I'll come to Amy's texts a couple of times, because Amy has stayed with me and she stayed with my work, and her writing has helped me understand and raise my ambition around the work, because her writing is so beautiful. And in this particular case, for Witness in 2008, made for the Jerwood Prize. The writing was done before the work was installed. So this is a massive 12-meter installation. And I'll read Amy's words here, but when I read Amy's words before I'd made the installation, it was very, very clear, but she'd written down my greatest ambition. And a lot of the time when you're installing work, there are surprises, you know, there are changes because of the light or the architecture or a million different things. So for Amy to have written this beautiful text for the catalogue before I'd installed the work really made me very aware of what my challenges were going to be. So she wrote, Witness, the tension between Twomey's palpable, I think it must be late here, delight in the materiality of clay and the delicious subversion of the properties of that medium is tangible across her oeuvre. In Witness, the work proposed for the present exhibition, this is manifest in her treatment of the intrinsic fragility of the work. An architectural intervention in the foyer of the Jerwood space. Witness will see the full height of the gallery walls temporarily coated in a thin layer of finely sprayed clay dust to create a faultless, sumptuous, light-absorbent surface. The velveteen softness of the clay powder defies both the malleable solidity of raw clay and the hard brittleness of fired clay. It is a different kind of fragility, soft and ephemeral, conjuring delicate butterfly wings or pollen-covered stamen. And this was where I was almost brought to tears reading it, because it was exactly what I wanted to make. Yet, did I have the skills and the time to pull that off? It was highly successful, but I think all of the works have their moments of great worry and concern. But to have read Amy's words made me sharper. I think it made me sharper. It made me realize that because she'd curated the work at the Tate Liverpool, she knew my ambition about the material, about the fragile nature of material, of the importance that we get involved when things aren't finished. And so her interpretation was incredible. My PowerPoint seems to be a little slow here. But again, moving on to Trophy. So I'm kind of dancing forward and back in time a little. But this is Trophy, and Trophy at the time, there was very little writing made about it because, again, it was a very new kind of work. And now we're in 2024, and I'm glad to say that all the barriers have been shattered. Many more things are possible in our public institutions. So we don't have the same ginormous sense of newness to the physical nature of intervention. I think we're familiar with that now. In 2006, we were not. And I remember we got a tiny, tiny little, I mean, it could have been the size of a stamp in The Guardian, saying this work was going to happen. And of course, that changes with the institutes you work with, and maybe it changes when it's understood as an artist you can be trusted. 2006 was still quite early in my career. But Martina Margetts, another one of our great, great critical writers that I know you'll be familiar with, wrote about Trophy quite recently in a beautiful essay, The Last Chance for Commodity Culture. And I'll read a couple of words here, which I'm very honoured to have these words placed around my work. So I suppose I'm trying to say to you how important I feel it is within my practice to have people who do what they do really well, who don't try and take territory from your art, but they try to find space with it and they try to help grow, you know, the hard-won ideas. To make things in public spaces is a hard-won activity, and it's one which is a huge honor. So anyway, so Martina's, you know, I'll read you a tiny bit of her text here. The desire to democratize the world and to locate one's place in it can be marked out metaphorically in space. Artist Clare Twomey creates a territory in which people can engage in thoughts about our responses to nature and the environment, to history and the cultural landscape, to possession and loss. Her recent one-day installation at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London consisted of thousands of tiny unglazed birds made at the Wedgwood factory in its trademark shades of blue, perched all over the ground and over the museum's collections of dozens of life-size castings of famous historic sculptures. Entitled Trophy, the visitor had the chance to select and take home a bird, thereby freely collecting a rare object from the museum. But over the course of a few hours, the continuous removal of birds created evident deterioration in the work as a whole, a collective loss experienced by the visitor in the face of personal gain. I could go on, but Martina articulated so well what was at the heart and the passion of making this word trophy. She understood the title of the work. And so to have this piece of text and to understand that she could see the work was also incredibly important to me, that I wasn't alone. There's somebody of Martina's criticality could look at the work and see what I'd hoped would be its role. I'm moving on to a couple of performative works here. This was made for the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust in 2000 and, well, it was started in 2015, but it was completed in 2016. And this was, I mean, was it maybe the first journalist who wrote about my work? It was definitely the first 2 full pages that I'd had in the Times, a huge article from Nancy Durant, who is a great journalist and who undertakes a massive amount of very broad arts coverage. And she made a difference to this project. Her writing made a difference to this project, that it elevated it to a national level, because people read about this piece of journalism, they came to Westminster Bridge. I'll read you a tiny bit of it, and then hopefully the story will become clearer. So the work is called Humanity is in Our Hands. It was made for the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, and that is always on the 27th of January, regardless of year. And she wrote, and it's journalistic. So it'll be interesting to see the different tenor of writing. A story of spoons that will stir the soul. Artist Clare Twomey tells Nancy Durant about her project, inspired by the horrors of Bosnia to honor victims of genocide. Almost a year ago, ceramicist Clare Twomey spent from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. walking up and down Westminster Bridge in London, handing out cards to bemused pedestrians. The day was the 27th of January, Holocaust Memorial Day, and on each card was an invitation to take part in a collaborative project involving Twomey, the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, and a Bosnian Muslim named Nisad. Directed to an online form, participants were asked 2 questions. What human qualities allow society to flourish? And can you describe, have you experienced this in your community? On the 27th of January 2016, this project will come to fruition, and Twomey will tramp the length of Westminster Bridge again for 12 hours, handing out the results, inscribed on porcelain spoons, to no doubt equally bemused passers-by. So there's a sense, I'll keep the slides moving, and you can see here the porcelain spoons, and this is the original invitation, humanity is in our hands. This is this is where the spoon design came from. They're original spoons that were carved in the death camp when Nisad was held. And Nisad is in the red jumper towards the back of this photograph. And this is us on Westminster Bridge, which I doubt that we'd be able to use now, actually. I think that quite a few public activities are probably prohibited now, but this was us handing out the spoons to the public. And because of Nancy's article and because of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust is, their patron is the Queen, then the BBC were on the bridge all day recording and interviewing. And the lovely gentleman you see just at the top there with his headphones on talking to me in my woolly hat. He said, I was in Streatham on the bus and I heard the interview. So I've come to get my spoon. And he hunted me out on the bridge. So there were actually 12 of us working as a team. So I can't take all the praise for handing out 2,000 spoons. But Nancy's, I think it'd be lovely to come back and talk to you about the role of journalism and the kind of writing journalism, intelligent journalism that can undertake to support the work as well. I'm moving in now to 2016, so vaguely in time order, to the William Morris Museum. And I turned the William Morris Museum in North London into a working studio where for 72 days, we took an apprentice a day to learn the skills of gilding with 24-karat gold. And as you can see here, the gold was fired as we went through the project. So the missing tiles were tiles that were still into the kiln, and it's a vast work of, I can't translate it better for you than 4 meters by 3 meters, jolly big. And so over this period of time, and of course there was a catalogue, and in the catalogue, dear Amy Dixon wrote again, and she wrote so beautifully. It was lovely to go back to somebody who was familiar with my work. And in the start of any new work, you have a great sense of worry and fragility, no matter how many works you've made. So it was wonderful that Amy could write. The work was called Time Present, Time Past. And I didn't read for you before. Actually, I think it's coming, actually. It's Monument she also wrote for. But there's a beautiful quote that both Amy and I really hovered around. The past is not dead, but it is living in us and will be alive in the future, which we are now helping to make. And that was from William Morris in 1893. I'll read you a couple of words that Amy Dixon wrote about this work. So you're going to have 3 texts from her in total. William Morris's working drawing Chrysanthemum, 1877, an intricate wallpaper design of pom-pom blooms and calligraphic foliage underpinned a subtle geometry, allows us to glimpse into the working process by which he achieved a seamless flowing pattern. The lower portion of the drawing reveals how he drew in pencil over a grid before adding watercolor, facilitating the repetition and transfer of elements by hand within the design. Clare Twomey has chosen Chrysanthemum as the starting point for her new work, Time Present and Time Past, a meditation on process and skill, which sees Morris's drawing enlarged to roughly 4 times its original scale and transferred to a panel of 130 ceramics tiles. Over the course of 68 days, and my apologies for 72, I put an extra week in, 68 volunteer apprentices from the general public will work alongside a master painter to painstakingly recreate Morris's design in 22-karat gold enamel tile by tile, echoing the squaring up technique he himself employed, using a grid to achieve the repeat in his own patterns. Visitors will bear witness to the process slowly unfolding like a golden flower coming into bloom as the master painter and their apprentices work on the ceramic tiles. Situated in the middle of the gallery, the lustrous gold will slowly flourish down the panel, echoing the tumbling waterfall composition of Morris's design. So there was a sense that I was moving into this work, which again is a very, very new work. You're trying to work out whether you've worked out all the problems or not. And so to have Amy's text was a very steadying element for me as an artist, to have her words, to know she was with me. And I had incredible curators who were with me, who safeguarded the space and made sure everything happened. But it was great to have Amy's words. And I'll move on to now a piece of work that you probably are familiar with. It was shown, sorry, I'm just going to whiz back. My slides are a little clumpy. Made in China, which was at the Yale Centre for British Art. It was the beautiful exhibition, Things of Beauty Growing, which was beautifully curated by the team at Yale, Glenn Anderson, and the wonderful late Simon Holding. And it's actually Glenn's words that I'm going to read for you. And of course, Made in China had been shown previously in a couple of venues. And so I guess in a way I've selected Glenn's words because I feel they articulate the place I wanted the work to be set. He wrote, and this was for one of the Yale journals. So this isn't in the catalogue, it's on the Yale journal, which I've forgotten the proper title of. It is an invasion of sorts, a legion of vases, each 5 foot high, made of porcelain, floridly patinated and scarlet red. They are placed throughout the Yale Centre for British Art, on every floor, in galleries, in the library court, on the stairs. The installation, Made in China, is by the artist Clare Twomey. Its effect is most improbable, with a surreal, larger-than-life quality. It is as if it is as if the caterers were about to deliver a banquet for thousands of people, or a factory floor had been teleported into the galleries, or as if ceramics were finally being recognized as a dominant genre in British art. All of those things are quite improbable. There are many reasons for the recent embrace of ceramics, among them a general permissiveness regarding artistic disciplines and a rediscovery of the instinctive, sensually gratifying nature of clay. Perhaps the most important, though, is that ceramics are good to think with, particularly regarding issues of labour. This topic is at the heart of Twomey's work, which illuminates the asymmetrical nature of global economic exchange. And I'll leave his text there, but in a way, I think we can see this, the thing I talked about, Alan Graves' writing, kind of having an aerial view. It's so helpful as an artist for a writer to take the time to have an aerial view, to place you amongst a larger understanding of not particularly installation, but around the purpose of working with clay. So it was a wonderful text to come out of this incredible project. I think I'm just going to move over now to a work that I made in, that's a good question. When was I lead artist at the Tate Modern? About 5 years ago. That's what I'm going to say, about 5 years ago. It's great, isn't it? And so I've only got 2 more things to talk to you about, and then I'll hand over to you. So I hope I'm not taking too much time by just highlighting these few projects in the texts. What you see here is an overview of the work I made, Factory at the Tate Modern, where I used, I'll read the article for you because he says it very well, but the writing here is very important. Art meets society, society meets art. And after a year of being a lead artist at the Tate and staying with the communities there in terms of there were lots of groups that came to work with this idea of production. And I went to see them. So I went to the valleys in Wales, I went to Plymouth, I went to Liverpool, and I met lots of the groups. So there was a sense that the starting statement that the Tate had for this year of residency was art meets society. But actually, by the end of it, I had, through a lot of work with a lot of curators and a lot of communities, had the wording changed in all of the Tate's understanding of what they do, which is it's society that meets art, not art that meets society. So that was a small win in my words, but I think I'd just like to read you another journalistic account, and this is a very surprising journalistic account. And again, super grateful to the 2 full pages The Guardian gave to this in August, and the press office at the Tate were like, we're not going to get any press in August. It's a terrible time to do press. And it was fantastic because Mark from The Guardian was a huge advocate for this work, that saw it. Well, it was a huge sensation, which was wonderful. And it definitely came from being written about in a broadsheet paper, you know, one of the very respected arts papers. So he wrote, it might not be everyone's idea of a fun day out, but visitors to a new art installation at the Tate Modern are being invited to knuckle down and do some work in a ceramics factory. They can mould or cast jugs, or if they prefer, mop the floor. The gallery has announced details of one of its most ambitious commissions, a production line art installation which will take up the entire 5th floor of its extension. The artist Clare Twomey is creating a working factory with 8 tons of processed clay, 30-metre production line, workers, a wall of dry racks, and over 2,000 fired clay objects. Into this environment will come Tate Modern visitors who can idly watch what's going on or physically clock in and help mould or cast the jugs, teapots, and flowers being produced. So in terms of the work that we'd done at the Tate Modern to craft our press statements, to craft what you can still read now on the Tate website, these beautiful words, then the journalist had come with an everyday language. And it was absolutely brilliant everyday language, because they give a lot of joy, but they give a lot of relevance to the work that was undertaken. But also in this exhibition, we had 80% new visitors to the Tate Modern. And I believe that clay is solely responsible.
Yeah, hi, Brian.
It's amazing that
Excellent. We'll see you when you get, what, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15? Okay. Okay. All right. Right.
this is some of the flower making that happened in the Tate as well. So I've got 2 more projects just to finish up with. And again, I come back to Amy Dixon's writing again. And this project, she wrote about the work in 2009, but the project went through many iterations and has been shown in many different places. But there's a very interesting shift that happened within the text. So in 2009, I will read you what Amy Dixon wrote. And then this work was most recently shown at the Museum of Modern Art in Paris just 2 years ago, where I built a new installation of it. And the writing up of it was really interesting. So I'm going to first read you Amy's words. And she starts with a quote from Dawn Ades, who is, of course, our great historian who had a massive review of the way we see art in the UK. So she quoted Dawn Ades. So I'm starting with Dawn Ades's words, and then I'll let you know when I move to Amy's words. So her quote at the beginning: "A monument in the classic sense of the term commemorates a person, event, or action. It can refer to a written record, a boundary, or other remains or remnants of something." And that's what Dawn Ades wrote. And Amy followed on with this: "In monument, broken tiles, plates, cups, jugs, mugs, and other ceramic shards possessing ghostly traces of everyday domestic life are stacked on top of one another, shattered domestic objects assembled on a monumental scale. Characteristically, Twomey places materiality at the heart of her work. The brittle fragility of fired ceramic renders monument precarious, at odds with the permanence of imperishable materials such as stone, bronze, steel, or steel ordinarily associated with the making of monuments or municipal sculptures, materials which, according to Ades, guarantee eternal fame while reminding the spectator of morality." Twomey's precarious, broken monument threatens to break further, collapsing in a landslide of broken china. I'll leave that there, but now I'd like to read you what was written only 24 months ago by the Museum of Modern Art. It was in an exhibition called Le Flammes, The Age of Ceramics, Le Flammes, The Age of British Ceramics, artist Clare Twomey installation monument examines the use and value of everyday commodities in its collapsing movement, raises contemporary questions of overproduction, overconsumption, and recycling. As the introduction to the exhibition, Le Flammes, this installation invites us to revise our preconceived ideas about ceramics and more precisely about porcelain, oscillating between function and sculpture. By looking at this work attentively, one realizes that its composition, like a painting, a very precise approach to colors and forms. So I thought that that was very interesting, that the same piece of work, this is at the Zuiderzee Museum. So sorry, I should say that the first image was at Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art. This was at the Zuiderzee, where Amy wrote her text. And this is at the Museum of Modern Art in Paris just a couple of years ago. And so this work has fortunately had a possibility to move with the times. And Consciousness, the first work I showed you, has done this too. These kind of key moments of sculptures that remain relevant because the center of their creation is about human responsibility in one form or other. This is just a kind of behind the scenes of Monument, which I thought you might enjoy. This is how I move art. You may have different practices. And then this is a detail of Monument at the Museum of Modern Art, and it was so beautiful. It was like a jewel. The curation for me on that was just incredible. So many beautiful pieces. And the final thing that I'm just quickly going to talk to you about, I'm hoping that I do have some text here, but it looks like I have. Oh, I have. Okay. So this is the preparing of the work, which is the public work, which has just been opened in January. That was commissioned during the pandemic, but is on the new Jubilee line on the building there, commissioned by Grosvenor. And this is that fantastically gigantic picture of it. And this is the final work. It's almost like a sketch running up the building. And and it's called Anatomy of Time, and it brings together, the building was already terracotta, and I absolutely insisted that I had to work with the original manufacturer so that none of the conceptual value was lost, not to bring new materials to the site. And the 5 leaves are of the ancient plants that would have been on this site and growing next to the River Tyburn that still runs beneath this building. So it's really raising up parts of the environment that aren't easily accessed. So it's bringing them back to life in some way. And of course, Mayfair is built with terracotta. It's not the Portland stone of Regent Street. It is streets and streets of wonderful terracotta. And I'm going to finish by reading you rather beautifully the words of Harry Addis. And Harry Addis is the son of Dawn Addis. So he's a dear friend, but he was able to write for this because he published a book about the plants of London that encapsulated and definitely inspired the finding of these beautiful plants. So Harry, writing not as a journalist, wrote, on the west face of 65 Davies Street, Clare Twomey's Anatomy of Time rises 6 stories above street level on a magnificent canvas of terracotta louvres. This landmark artwork is the largest of its kind in Mayfair, opening an exciting new chapter for public art in the area and marking a significant new milestone for women artists. Despite its soaring prominence, Anatomy of Time is firmly rooted in its locale. It draws inspiration from the site's natural and physical history while holding a dialogue with the materials and motifs of the surroundings. The work also reaches forwards, maintaining a deeply respectful eye on its legacy to neighbours and neighbourhood. 10 leaves carved from the clay in counter relief cascade across the building as if carried away on the fast-running brook, specifically, in fact, the Tyburn, one of London's ancient rivers, which still courses through the culverts directly beneath the building. In changing light, subtle differences in the shades of the terracotta and the varied coloured glazes at the margins of the leaves animate the facade, particularly beneath the dancing shadows cast by the trees opposite. So I shall leave that there. And I hope that my journey through the writings that I've experienced as an artist has been helpful whilst looking at the work. And that's me. I've said a lot for 44 minutes, apparently.
Excellent. Thank you, Claire. I think you can stop screen sharing and we'll be able to have everybody chime in where and when they want to. I always try to start it off with a little comment, and I was writing words down. But what really struck me was I wrote down intersections and interactions, and that made me think of Paul Ricoeur. I don't know if he was a French philosopher who wrote about how with every encounter, we go into it pre-configured. We then have some form of configuration with that encounter, and we go forward reconfigured. And I think about the interactions and the intersections that seem to be relatively constant in your work. And I think about the ways in which you send your work out into the world, the birds, the cups that were adopted, giving the birds went forward anonymously, but these cups that were adopted from the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City, and then for the rest of the group at NCECA, Claire was telling me about receiving information or a request from a person who took one home and then it broke and wanted a replacement. And I thought about how would that be with an adoption, but your work, anyway, your work you disseminate it, you have these intersections, and it is so much about being human. And I just value it so much that, and I want to open this up to all other comments. We don't have a shy group here, so come on. Joe, are you unmuted?
Robert has his hand up. I'll go after Robert.
Okay,
Oh,
Robert, go
thanks,
ahead.
Joe. Nothing. You know, I was really struck by the piece that's constructed of the piles in the gallery. When I first saw it, it reminded me of a kiln yard I saw in China that was about 20 feet deep in shards, and people were pulling them out of there. And it was really remarkable to think of 700 years of kiln site, you know.
Yeah, I haven't been to Xingdashan, and
Yeah.
I think that I haven't been because I'm not sure I'll ever come back. So I'm just trying to get my children old enough so they just accept I might come back. I think that
Well,
I've just seen the
Elaine
most.
and I have been there 15 times, so it's safe.
Well,
Yeah.
this
Oh,
one,
I just mean that I might just set up studio and make.
Oh, well, that's true. That is
Yeah. No. My concern was my artistic greed.
well, the other thing that struck me about that was a unique way of delivering art to a museum, and thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
The did
I'm
you
sorry,
ever?
did you
There's a
say-
piece called Smorgy Bob the Chef, which was by Robert Arneson, and it's a chef. It's an optical illusion, really, because it's a panel that comes out of the corner of a wall, and it's a chef standing behind a whole table of food. And so when I saw the pile, my first thought was that must be built over some sort of scaffolding, but that's not the case. That's a full pile of shards, or is there something behind there?
There's no glue. It's all carefully. I think that was I enjoyed so much in Paris that it was a smaller scale installation because it was the entrance piece at the top of this wonderful run of stairs. So it was put there to terrify people as they came into the exhibition. But it meant that we could really work at the curation, and of course the work follows the manufacturers. So when it was in France, then just some really wonderful people helped because it was in the pandemic, and of course the hotel industry was really hard struck in the pandemic because they weren't making new services because there was no, and so but it was amazing to craft that. And so it's very interesting as the industry changes and there are hopes of building it again. You kind of think, wow, what would it look like now? Because it reflects where we're at, you know.
Sure. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, those really knocked me out. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Joe.
I was just going to say that I was also writing down some words, or in my mind, I was writing them down, but the word responsibility sort of jumped out at me because it was your word that you were being responsible to your creative intelligence, your creative urges, but it was also the responsibility of the viewer or the participant. And I was thinking how in our late 20th century and now our early 21st century, how performance has really been adopted by the clay community, whereas previously, other than George Orr maybe, or those who would, create the biggest, most fantastic vessel at a county fair, there wasn't much performance involved in clay. So now it's almost become a discipline onto itself. And I think that you have well integrated it into your practice where it doesn't feel contrived. Sometimes I feel clay performances feel very manufactured, but yeah. I didn't feel that with yours. I thought mostly they were pointedly giving or providing, conveying a point of view. So
Jo,
it's very hard for an artist to do their own point of view.
Joe, I really appreciate you saying that. Like, I really appreciate that, because I think that it's really important that the integrity leads the work, and that can be quite difficult, because you have to be, as you say, the wonderful word responsibility. It's a beautiful word to have within the practice that I have, because it's a mirror to every viewpoint of the work, and because you have to wholly let go, you have to have crafted what the work may be to many people, and you must accept wholeheartedly when something is live that if it's performing in a way that you hadn't expected, you have to understand that is what others see within the work. So it's a really interesting relationship, because live work you only make as it is live. And it's interesting, I've been testing this piece of work, and I've tested it in a couple of different sites so far, and I still haven't got it right. So in a way, I don't know, will I ever get it right? Maybe it's the piece of work I'm never going to solve, but I tried it in the Museum of Angers, a different version to a version I tried in Suffolk, and then I think maybe I've got it nailed. I think that I might have it nailed for another museum, but I really appreciate, Joe, you being able to see the labor of that it's important to get it right. It's so important to allow people to arrive unburdened. It's really important that people arrive unburdened, but they feel sincerity, because there's this massive moment of trust. Just this massive moment of trust when you ask people to take a spoon on Westminster Bridge. They're like going, but I don't want it, because they're used to free holidays being given, or, you know, something being amiss. And so there are many situations where sincerity is the only language that holds any, I don't know, ethics. Maybe it's ethics within the work.
Well, also, I just wanted to say, as a curator, along with other people on this screen, we don't often know how our writing or our curation impacts an artist. So to have you read the words that definitely inflected your work, or gave more, I'm not going to say more meaning, but gave another layer of meaning to your work, I think is incredibly heartwarming for us who are on the other side of the screen, right? We do our jobs, and we hope we do them well, but we don't often get that kind of feedback. So you never know what you do in a sense of curation, or in a sense of writing a review, or, you know, a narrative or a poem, how it is going to propel the person that you've done it for, you know, how that it has kind of changed their trajectory in a positive or even a negative way. That, you know, words do have power, and curation is its own skill. So it's good to see that you put them together, because I have never experienced an artist talking about that before. And I think it's really instructive. And I would suggest, and I said to Elaine, maybe you could share your notes with us, your writings that referred, because I think there could be some, you know, master class in this sort of pairing of an artist practice along with writers, because it does make a really good intersection and connection for how the, you know, the ephemeral of the work becomes archival in the writing.
Yeah, I think, and it's funny, I'm going to, there's a 2-day symposium about archiving in London from next weekend, and it's exactly about this. And we've just put in a grant application to one of our big research bodies about how do we archive the ephemeral, and in many ways it is the writing, it is the curation that places in a historical context. And it is, I mean, I think for all of us on the call, if I'm talking to another generation who, you know, I presume most of us grew up without the internet. This idea that, you know, to explain that what we did in Trophy, there was no social media. It was you in the room with yourself deciding whether you were going to steal something from the V&A. There was no kind of wave of momentum saying it's okay. It was you and the 50 people in the room with you who made those commitments to undertaking this. And so I think in terms of the writing and the archiving, especially those two pieces of writing on Monument, it was a joy today to put that together, because I was going, of course, they're like 10 years apart and they brought new agendas, because, and for me, it's really heartening. The work is still relevant. You know, it's
Great. Yeah,
amazing.
that's great. I want to go back to Joe, you were talking about the performance, and I think it's really important. This isn't a question, it's just a statement, but I think it's really important for us as writers, when we talk about performance, or we are writing about performance, that we relate it to the greater history of performance and not just to ceramics performance. Just as the artists creating it need to know what came before them in the greater world of performance. We tend to be a little myopic in the ceramics field. And anyway, that was just a comment.
There was a lovely exhibition that's just opened. Sorry, I see this as a kind of parallel. There's I think of the exhibition Now I See You, and it's women artists in Britain, predominantly working in Britain or have moved to Britain to work, but the first recorded artist in Britain is 1510, and the exhibition somehow places women back into the larger art scene, but not at a loss to the greater purview, which is kind of, I think, what you're saying is that it's so important to look beyond the boundaries of material to find equivalent articulations of whether that's social justice or environmental justice or whatever. I think it's to place where you know I'm going to say this, would place clay in a wider context. It's a great test for the work. It's a great test for the thinking.
Well, Janet had to leave. We're getting coming up on an hour from our recording, so we've done well. Any final thoughts or questions for Claire from anyone? I had been trying to get to reach Claire, and then when I was in India, I had the opportunity to meet her husband, who gave a wonderful presentation there, and asked for her email. So I emailed her, and then never got an answer. And we just recently, somebody, to my plea to this group, she came back and said my messages had all gone to clutter. And I love that. I don't know that we have a clutter box in American email, but I love that. So
It's great. It's been lovely to be able to talk with you this evening, and I really appreciate your generosity and your thoughts as well. So thank you so much. And it's
thank you for being with us, Claire. It was great. It was
Claire.
really
Thank you
good.
much. Very enlightening.
lovely
Yeah.
to meet you all, and I hope your next session is really great as well. I think your gathering is so important. You know, all your knowledge. It's just, I'm going to go to your YouTube site and see what you've got.
If you just look up critical connections in ceramics and craft, it will come up. And next month, speaking of that, will be Shammai Gibsh from Israel, and he's recently, just within the past 2 years, done a self-published book on Amazon's print on demand, and he's going to talk about that process and how he was able to do that. He has sold upwards of 1,000 copies through Amazon, just through print on demand, and his costs were minimal, and the returns on it are really quite good for publishing. So he's going to talk about that next month. He'll be in America, so he'll be out of harm's way in Tel Aviv. Thank goodness. But anyway, thank you again. Thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks so much. Lovely to meet you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.